Here we are.
We are really sorry. Seems that we had a little bit of technical difficulty and we got cut off in the middle of talking about that Selective Service Act. But you know what? Hey, it was a good place for us to kind of put an end to that right now. And we're going to move on in to briefly covering a little bit more of that proactive America. Not getting into the war, but definitely leaning Allied side. And so again, with that Selective Service Act, real quick, we see again 18 to 64-year-old individuals
Have to register.
have to register. They don't take 18-year-olds until much later,
Right.
but we get to that eventually.
It's 21 to
Roughly
36.
Yeah, roughly about that 21, 36-year-old that time frame there. Because again, you get up to somebody who's in their 50s. Don't get me wrong, 50-year-olds probably have a little bit of stamina, but not anything like a 21-year-old.
And do they? I mean, the average life expectancy is what, 62?
Yes, during this time.
Which
yes.
is funny that 64.
Exactly.
Because at this point, isn't Social Security kick in at 60?
Yes.
So you could be on Social Security.
Exactly
and
right.
get
You're on.
drafted.
Yep, exactly right.
Where are you sending me, boss?
We're gonna send you to Guadalcanal. What?
Hard pass.
Maybe if I'm, sitting behind a desk that says
Maybe.
Guadalcanal,
See,
but
do we have air conditioning?
no, that's not yet.
No, it's not.
But anyway, like I mentioned before, we're gonna move more towards the Allied-leaning, proactive America. Again, we see that horizon line. We know something's going to come. And again, we want to be on the side of the good guys.
We know who the good guys are this time.
Exactly.
It's not really a question this time. Last time, there was some iffiness.
Yeah, there was.
Because of the Serbians, really.
Yes,
More than anything
exactly.
else, the Serbians were the bad guys, but they were on the good guys' side. So it really made it a little more complicated than necessary.
We know
This time,
now.
we look at Japan, and we look at Germany and Italy, and we're like, it's obvious who the aggressors are.
If George W. Bush was the president at the time in the 1930s and 40s, he would have been easily able to use that phrase, axis of evil.
Well, that's where the axis goes through. I
Exactly.
Mean, that name gets used by, is it Churchill?
Probably so.
Probably. He coins a lot of cool phrases.
He does.
He's got a great command of the English language.
And so again, with this idea of the Destroyers for Bases program, this is going right before right before the beginning of the election in 1940.
Yeah, I do believe Destroyers for Bases is in September or October. I'm sure the deal was started somewhere I don't think it took too long, but the British were short.
Well, again,
They needed destroyers of any sort.
You're exactly right. And
to protect their convoys.
It started in September, runs in through really the pretty much almost 41, 42 more than likely.
Before they get those destroyers, or I think we sent them a bunch of old DDs.
Well, we
to
do.
World War I.
We do. We send them 50 Caldwell, Wicks, and Clemson class destroyers.
Yeah.
Those are the old ones there. But the idea again, of course, is that in return we get those Caribbean bases.
Well, don't we also get access to Greenland and Iceland at the same time? Or is that a different deal?
Believe we might do that as well. Let's double check and see here. You're right. We do get also rent-free access to, let's see here. Yeah, Newfoundland into Greenland and Iceland as well.
So that's awesome. They give away Danish bases for British. Awesome. Winston Churchill, he should have been a merchant.
We don't talk about that.
He would have been so rich it wouldn't have been funny.
Well, exactly. But
I think that's the American side.
That's true. That's
most
true.
people don't know he was half American.
Right. His mother's
side,
was American.
Yes.
But again, think about it this way. Not only do we get those northern Atlantic bases, we also see things such as free rent for Jamaica, Trinidad. We'll end up getting parts of Antigua and the Bahamas. I mean, who the heck wouldn't want to go and have some...
Sounds like something from Cocktail.
Exactly. But again, the point is if we had any issues Now, again, we know the Germans are using submarines.
Oh, yeah.
And they are using
right.
them wonderfully, by the way. And so if we can protect our border to the south with some of those British bases in the Caribbean, heck, why not?
Yeah.
We'll give the British a bunch of our old destroyers that, I wouldn't say they're out of date too bad, but they're still out of date. And so, but again, that is a great opportunity for Americans to again say that we're neutral, but again, helping our friends.
I'm sure the Germans didn't feel like it was very neutral.
No, they more than likely did not, which I think again begs the question of how the United States did not get into the war beforehand, or a German attack on American soil before this whole selective service and destroyers for bases program. Now, the next major act that comes through is right after
The election.
So in 1941, we see here the Lend
Where
Lease.
he promises not to get us entangled in European affairs.
Again, crossing his fingers.
In his toes.
In his toes and his legs and everything else.
Cross his toes.
Yeah, probably not.
Polio
Polio kind of does that to you. But again, we see here with the Lend Lease program, we're going to lend or lease out some of our weaponry to quote unquote nations vital to the United States. Okay, what makes them vital to the United States, you might ask?
The president says so.
Exactly so.
And this is, just to bring it to modern times. When if you take a class today in government or the executive branch, the talk will be about the imperial presidency.
Yes.
And this is where the imperial presidency really gets going. There was some little bit of stuff with like Roosevelt and Wilson, but
no,
FDR is the start of
is
the
the
imperial
guy.
presidency. He's the one that gets Congress to give him literally carte blanche to decide who our friends are.
I mean, seriously, the idea of giving a president his own age, like a title in a way of an era, then again, no president served longer than 8 years.
Right.
But
we've never even had anybody dip into that extra time they could get if they were vice president.
Exactly.
Never had it happen.
No, we never, because in theoretical sense, you could serve up to 10 years being the vice president, taking over for the president the last 2 years of their presidency, and still have your 2 terms. So you can have a max of 10 years. FDR, he's like, hey, if it's good and it's working, don't fix it.
Besides, who are you going to pick?
Right. Who else is better than a guy who can get us out of the Depression? Oh, wait. Did he really get us out of the Depression? That's a story
He
for
made us
another
feel
day.
good about it.
There you go.
The fireside chats were wildly effective at building a loyal base because he was the only good news or encouragement they heard for 10 years.
That's a good point.
I mean, I have plenty of faults with what Roosevelt did, but he was not dumb, and he did very good things at a time when our country needed it.
Exactly. And so again, continuing with this idea of that who are our friends? And which side are we going to go? I mean, again,
It's a done deal, I think.
Well,
I don't think there was any debate whether we would be on Hitler's side. I don't think that was even a possibility. Unlike World War I.
Exactly. What I mean is, like, which side do we go? Atlantic or Pacific?
Oh, well, that's definitely a different question.
Do we go Atlantic side and help our good friends over here in France and Great Britain, or do we go after people who are going to be taking over quite a few of our bases over here? If you were to ask the Navy, if you were to ask those naval officers, I'm sure they probably would say, hey, here, there's a lot more going on over here than over in Europe.
There's some submarines. Destroyers are not glamorous.
No.
Like battleships and carriers.
No.
But the interesting thing is, in the 30s, the Navy did its war plans, and they always have it. One of their war plans was what would happen if they went to war with Great Britain?
Oh my gosh, really?
Every eventuality. That's what they went for.
Oh my goodness.
But one of the things that they discovered in that war, because that's a real Navy.
It is.
That would have been a knockdown drag out. One of the things that the Navy decided to start emphasizing was submarine warfare itself.
Huh.
Now, it's really unglamorous, considering the submarines are called pig boats. These are the things, you can't flush the toilets unless you're surface, because otherwise the pressure will literally blow the crap out of the toilet.
Oh my goodness.
And guess where you're going to be standing? Flushing the toilet. So these things are nasty, smelling, and fairly short range, although we develop, because of the distances, we have to develop submarines that go a long, long way. And so we end up with some really interesting capabilities that, to be perfectly honest, I think there's like one World War II movie that even discusses American submarines. It is not something that is glamorous. It's not something we talk about. But spoiler alert, it destroys the Japanese Navy.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. I'm sure it did. Which again, the whole understanding of pre-American involvement in World War I or World War II is, again, how do we prepare? Now, you mentioned earlier, we talk again, the Pacific Fleet. This was off camera, I'm sorry, but we talk about how the Pacific Fleet was stationed in San Francisco.
Right.
Up until 1940, you say, correct? Roughly?
I want to say 1940.
Okay. So again, we're right at that timeline.
So the Japanese take Indochina.
And we finally realize, we
realize
goodness.
that they've got plans for expansion that go far beyond what China is. And
Yes.
so Roosevelt orders the fleet to Pearl Harbor.
Right.
Also an awesome port. Well, really, unless they moved them to Manila, there's nowhere else in the Pacific that's closer to Japan, but not exposed. Manila's way too exposed.
Right. Hawaii is considered the crossroads of the Pacific for a reason.
Yes.
You know, you're pretty much thinking about it in terms of our understanding of the continental United States. You're pretty much like in Kansas.
Yeah.
Or Missouri.
Yeah, you're right in the middle. If you want to go somewhere in the Pacific, Honolulu is a good place to start.
Sure. I mean, because you're about maybe 3,000 miles to Valparaiso, which is in South America. You're about maybe 4,000 to Japan, Manila, and then you're about maybe 4,500, 5,000 to Sydney.
Yeah, I mean, all these distances are huge.
Yes,
they're
the
Atlantic.
Yeah, they're huge, but again, that's one of the reasons why we had those coaling stations. That's one of the reasons why we were expanding into the Pacific. But regardless of it, we are inching our way into the war. And by about what? I think it was about August, September of 41, that we will sign that Atlantic Charter.
Yes.
That it is
September, I do believe.
Yes. So just months before that inevitable time of our eventual entry into the war.
In case somebody watching didn't know about December 7th.
Yeah. So if anybody didn't know, yes, the December 7, 41. But the idea, of course, is the Atlantic Charter. It's right there in the name. Where are we going to go? We're going to straight to the Atlantic. We're going to take on Hitler's Axis, Mussolini's Axis. Even though we really don't care so much about Mussolini, he's kind of a Looney Tune. Nobody really because again,
he has pretensions of being a great power without being a great power.
Well, if you've watched earlier episodes, we talked about how the fact that when Hitler is banking on Mussolini to again help take over Greece, make sure that they can get
49 assaults.
Exactly.
They were 0-49.
Yeah. Wow. Well,
really, once they got done invading Albania in '39, they were pretty much done as far as victories.
And exactly,
the Italians just didn't have it in them. But anyway.
But again, we are attacking Germany.
Yeah, Germany is the one they talk about. Mr. Hitler is the guy we're aiming at.
Exactly. I mean, it's just we team up with Winston Churchill. We team up with the French premier, what we can, who's in exile at the time.
Well, actually, he's in.
Oh, that's right.
Austria.
That's
jail.
right. That's right. He's in jail.
Wow.
So we are going to attack the German Axis first, and then see what we can do about Japan.
Right.
I mean,
but there's a huge development. The second embargo.
Oh, that's true.
The big oil embargo.
That is
on
true.
Japan. When was that?
That will come roughly around that same time we do sign the Atlantic Charter. Let me get you
41 or 40. I know it's in that zone, and I know it's after that point. Japan imports about 90% of its oil. even at this stage, even with Indochina, because Indochina has rubber but not a lot of oil.
So that would be actually, unfortunately, I misspoke. It would be in July of 41.
July
that
of 41. Really, there's no other way to interpret this embargo except as a fairly provocative move.
Well, again,
It's an almost Iberia.
yeah,
Because surely Roosevelt would have had enough advisors to tell him, if you cut off their oil, they're going to have to do something crazy or give in, which they're not going to withdraw from China,
well, again, there are people who are,
let alone Indochina.
there are people who are death before dishonor. You know,
Yes.
why would you want to turn tail and run back to your homeland?
Especially when you own so much of China.
Exactly.
There's no. You basically won the war. You're not going to give it up.
No. And so we find now by July of 41, Japan says, we have to stop. We have to stop this military aggression.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, of course, the fleet's been moved out to Pearl Harbor. This embargo's gone on. It looks very aggressive from a Japanese standpoint, but only because they have plans to go other places.
Exactly. So a reactionary plan by the United States, but an aggressive attack from the eyes of the Japanese.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit more than I do something and you do something back, and it seems fairly even. This
Right.
to the Japanese seems like, I slapped you, you punched me.
Right, exactly. Like Big Brother's coming down and knocking the crap out of you.
Given the fact that it was an oil embargo, it punched some below the belt.
Exactly.
Very
exactly.
below the belt. Because they didn't have a huge oil reserve.
No.
They were looking at 5 or 6 months without any oil. I mean, they were still getting some from their own territories and
Sure.
importing some from others. But if the Americans say no, the British and the Canadians and the Australians are all going to follow suit.
Well, and that's the big reason.
And the Canadians and the Australians this time are not big oil exporters.
No, they're not. They're not.
And if the British follow suit, you have to go rely on the Dutch,
Yeah.
who are going to follow, especially now that the Queen of the Netherlands is living in London.
There's there's a little bit of bias there, and I don't think they're going to go the Japanese way. But by again the time of 1941, this is where we're seeing on the Pacific side anyway.
Yes.
But
I mean, Japan's angry,
yeah, they're pissed.
but at the same time, that's July. So
Yeah.
by August, Japan's already looking at going to war.
And that's where
They're
we start
developing those plans.
And that's where we start to see it. We start to see some of that espionage going on. And this is, of course, before even July, more than likely. Once they start to move those fleets, those ships into Pearl Harbor, people of the Japanese espionage group are there. They're working. And again, the people who are native Hawaiians, and, well, of course, they're very close cousins, are not very different from the Japanese. And you have a lot of Japanese working in Hawaii.
Yes.
On the plantations.
I don't think it would be very difficult for a Japanese spy
No.
to work in Honolulu.
No.
Would blend in fairly well with the Japanese population. Not so much the Hawaiian population; they don't look alike at all.
No.
But maybe to a New Yorker they do.
Well, if you're sitting on your USS Texas, you're thinking, oh.
Well, and most likely they're in some sort of service job.
Sure.
You're not even really paying attention.
Yeah, exactly.
But
we do again. We start to see the models. We start to see the issues.
Oh yeah, they had a beautiful diorama of Pearl Harbor.
Oh my goodness,
including
yes.
Ford Island and its
Exactly.
fortifications.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And then of course they had this little lagoon that was full of those model ships and how they were going to attack.
They were a battleship was like 16 feet long or something like. They did everything to scale.
Exactly.
The detail that they went into was.
It was
amazing.
Yes, it was very much of a detail-oriented, but then again, they are a detail-oriented people.
Well, in their Navy especially, it's a very technical field anyway.
Exactly.
You can't just wing it.
No.
With ships, or
No.
they break down or they sink.
Right.
And of course they don't hire, the head of the Japanese Navy, Mr.
Yamamoto?
Isoroku Yamamoto, who studied in America, tells them it's a bad idea.
Of course.
You do not want to awaken the sleeping giant. It's too big, too powerful. It'll be, but they say, without this oil, we either have to surrender in China, or we have to go to war with America. And he does, like so many officers, doesn't matter whether they're Japanese or not. He basically bows and says, well, if that's what it has to be, we've got to win quickly.
Yeah.
So we've got to go after a knockout blow. How do we get America to see that they can't win in the Pacific quickly? And so his main target, obviously the Philippines is nice, Guam and Midway and Wake are nice, but Pearl Harbor
is the guy.
Yeah, it's the chin.
Yes, you're getting the uppercut right there to the chin. But here's the thing, and what some people don't quite realize, right after Pearl Harbor in December 7, 1941, those Japanese aren't done. No. They come back and they go into Manila.
Yes.
And they will actually attack Manila December 8, 1941.
Mm-hmm. Not the same carriers, obviously.
No, of course not. But the idea is they have that two-pronged attack.
Yes.
They go after the Americans in Pearl Harbor, and then they go after the Americans and Filipinos in their jewel of the Pacific.
And they go after Malaysia and the Dutch East Indies.
Of course.
Because Singapore is under siege by Christmas.
Exactly.
So they do not waste any time.
They're quick. They realize that if they cannot win, if there's no other way. You have to strike hard, you have to strike fast, and that's it.
Right. I mean, going after the Dutch East Indies, well, the Dutch aren't going to do anything to you.
No, of course.
But the British are going to fight for the Dutch.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a problem. So you're going to have to go after India because that's where the British will be coming from.
Exactly. And of course, you see here within Australia.
Yes.
And that was their next big target. Now, they will have what is called the Australians' Pearl Harbor at the city of Darwin.
Yes.
And of course, if you've ever seen that movie Australia with Hugh Jackman, Nicole Kidman, that's a good representation, I feel, in a way. I like it. It's very similar to the American Pearl Harbor. Okay. Not as long, but right. They do have a very good battle scene of how the Japanese would dive bomb and they would, try to destroy it. Of course, this is a big port.
Yeah, well, it's their access to the Far East.
Exactly.
Their other ports are down here. They go east and west, not north.
Right. And so again, and you see a lot of the beef cattle that are going to be feeding all of these soldiers in the Far East and those who are yummy. But again, the Japanese are ready, and they realized,
very similar to the invasion of the Soviet Union.
Correct.
They move things into position. They use a storm front to follow almost all the way to Pearl Harbor
to mask
so nobody sees it. Mm-hmm. A ploy they will use again at Midway.
Which again, you got to realize that these Japanese carriers, they're very far away from home.
I mean,
you're looking at what, about 3,000 miles from home.
Well, and they're significantly far away from their supply bases.
Exactly.
They are sneaking in to do that knockout blow to the United States.
Yes, exactly.
They've rehearsed it.
Time and time
again. They've rehearsed it in the little boats with the officers, and then they've rehearsed it with the airplanes and the pilots and the naval crews. Yep. They are ready. They just don't have enough amphibious capability to land troops on Oahu. Which Yamamoto was looking at. This could be obviously, if you sink the fleet, that's good. But if you take the entire port, America is all the way back in San Francisco.
3,000 miles.
3,000 miles with no bases between there and San Francisco.
No.
That's the knockout blow. That's the what if he is playing for, because he has already told them, we can't win a long war.
No.
We have to win quick. Well, what does the United States do if they sink the fleet in Pearl Harbor?
There's nothing.
We don't have a Pacific fleet.
Right.
We have to go raid the Atlantic fleet.
Exactly.
And it's got to sail all the way to San Francisco and San Diego. And then what? It's almost at the extreme edge of its operational range to even get back to Hawaii.
Exactly.
So the Marine Corps is going to have to figure out how to land in Oahu.
Oh, good luck.
From some of the 3,000 miles away, not like Guadalcanal from Australia.
Right,
Whereas,
or even going from New Guinea up into Peleliu or Truk or any of these others that are maybe what 1,500 miles.
So on the face of it, his plan is workable.
Right.
He spent time after time after time practicing to make sure this goes off without a hitch. And other than the midget sub getting sunk on December 6th, but for some reason that doesn't alert Americans that there is something weird going on. There's like 2 different incidents with these midget subs, 2 and 4 man subs, that should have been a big indicator that there was something fishy up.
Yeah.
I mean, and they've been told to be worried about espionage. So what does the general on Oahu do? Parks his planes wingtip to wingtip, so that they're easier to guard.
Yep.
Which I'm sure Yamamoto didn't have that in his plan.
No.
That was a bonus point for him.
Oh, yes. So when you see these Japanese Zeros coming across the way here, they're thinking, oh, yes, thank you, and just mowing down these aircraft.
Oh, yeah.
And completely destroying
just one
what we
good
could.
One,
Yeah.
Who knows how many you could get in one run where you don't have to destroy them. You just damage them so badly that they can't get up, or it's going to take them weeks to get it fixed.
Exactly. Right. I think, honestly, the saving grace that we see here with Pearl Harbor is the fact that the aircraft carriers were not in port.
Right. They were down towards Panama on an exercise.
Exactly.
Working with the Caribbean fleet.
Which was, again...
it was just a fluke.
Yeah. It was just...
There was no plan. Yamamoto didn't get any warning about it, so it was obviously kept a fairly decent secret from the public.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because if not, they would have called the whole thing off, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because he already understood that carriers are a hugely valuable resource. Because, well, he was a very forward-thinking admiral. Very forward-thinking.
He's nothing like what Tojo is.
No, Tojo is an air guy, but he's a reactionary Bushido kind of guy.
Right.
Whereas Yamamoto is more the educated, I'm a warrior who happens to like boats. And I'm going to be really good at my job.
Exactly.
And he is very good at his job.
Yes.
Well, so good eventually we assassinate him.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's how good he is. Even at the point he's assassinated, the Japanese Navy's already hurting, but we don't want it to have any chance of rallying.
Of course not.
And he's the guy who could do it.
He would be that in a way, martyr, if you will, or the rallying cry that these Japanese are like, let's go.
Let's go. And the morning of December 7th, here it comes.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Sunday morning, most sailors are on a 48-hour pass.
Most people are either at church or
they're at church. Well, in fact, most of the people on boats are at church in their morning chapel service, or they're doing general upkeep that never ends on a boat.
Of course not.
You have to be swabbing decks and serving potatoes and all those other things that get done when these 4 aircraft carriers just unload all their airplanes.
So about what, maybe 200 or 300?
I think it was 300 and some odd on the first wave, which is everybody.
Right. And so you got to keep in mind, though, again, the attack on Pearl Harbor. Yes, it's a surprise attack, but you had to think: was there something that the Navy could have done? Did they know the Japanese code yet? Did they know something was happening?
Code. That doesn't happen until in the spring.
Right.
Of 42.
Right before Midway. Right.
There's all these things. There's all these clues.
Sure.
That when you look in hindsight at these clues, which again, these clues are not in this, it's not like one guy sitting there with the midget sub reports.
Right. No, there's
the fact that the Japanese fleet is missing from its port.
Right.
There's all these different places.
There's 5 or 6 different groups of people monitoring radar or
right. You got the radar people who see the planes coming in, but
sure.
they think it's a bomber group that was supposed to be coming from California.
Yeah, true.
They're coming from the wrong direction, but whatever.
Yeah, well.
But anyway, and they come from over the top of the island, over Kolikoli Pass, which is fairly high up, a couple thousand feet at least. But you come over Coley Pass, you look down, and Pearl Harbor's laid out like the diagram they would have practiced with.
Literally,
I mean, just
on a silver platter.
And that's where this radar station was Coley Pass. I had lunch up there one day.
Oh, really?
It was chilly.
I bet.
Wind was
Quite brisk.
quite brisk.
Yeah.
And that was, in the middle of summer.
Wow.
Usually I didn't ever think of anything as cold in the summer in Hawaii.
Well.
But, here comes this attack that is just brutal. I mean, we have the movie Pearl Harbor. We have
Yes.
Tora, which I think is a really good historical movie because it's told from both sides.
Correct.
And they go for historical accuracy over drama. Because there's plenty of drama already.
Yes, of course.
Pearl Harbor with Ben Affleck and the gang is historically, okay.
Right. Right.
And they include like the black sailor who shoots down several planes and
Correct.
earns himself awards and some acclaim. But that's kind of like Dunkirk as a victory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he shot down a couple planes, but by the way, they sank how many battleships?
Right.
I mean, just absolutely destroyed the Arizona
and the Oklahoma,
the Texas,
the Utah,
the Pennsylvania,
Nevada.
Maybe.
There were
either
at least,
damaged or destroyed.
Right, damaged or destroyed almost 12 fleets.
Well, sank.
12 of them.
I shouldn't say destroyed.
Yeah, right,
They
right.
destroyed the Arizona.
Right.
That's about it.
Yes.
They sank a whole lot of those ships.
That's true. Of course, most of those ships do become repairable within.
Yeah, Texas serves the rest of the war.
Right. The
I'm
Utah.
trying to remember, is it a North Carolina class? It's
think
before the
so.
Iowa, which
Yeah.
is the New Jersey and the Missouri and those.
Right.
But it's the older, but they're still new compared to.
Right.
We still have a couple World War I era battleships running around.
Mhm.
But these are relatively new
Mhm.
because the Navy, even in this time of isolation, the Navy gets a good chunk of the budget.
Sure.
So they get to build new battleships and stuff.
There you go.
But as far as the victory goes, on the face of it, it looks like a tremendous victory. And it is a tactical victory for the Japanese Navy. They win the battle.
Yes, they do. They do.
But it is not a strategic victory by any means. It's a draw, I guess, at best, because the carriers aren't there like you mentioned.
Correct.
Carriers aren't there. That's 4 carriers. The whole Pacific Fleet were the carriers.
Yes.
Aren't there, plus their escort ships, which mostly destroyers.
Yeah.
Over half those battleships that are sunk are back in action within 6 months because they basically just seal the hole, pump the water out, and put them back in float.
Exactly.
Which is amazing. And this is something the Japanese, it's a technology the Japanese don't have.
Well, and
it comes to bite them, not just here, after Coral Sea, with Yorktown. Yorktown's listing like 20-some degrees of list. The Japanese figure it sank on the way home.
Oh, yeah.
Instead, it's already back in action because Coral Sea is April of 42, midway's in early July.
Yeah.
It's already back in combat shape.
Right.
The Japanese have no belief that can be done. They could never do that with theirs, so they don't believe Americans can either.
Well,
but our ability to do damage control is light years ahead of theirs.
Of course.
Theirs kind of like, if your ship takes damage, you're probably going to sink.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, it's a one-shot deal.
Exactly. They are again looking for that knockout TKO. When it doesn't come, I think honestly that's probably the.
I'm sure Yamamoto, once he
downfall.
found out that the carriers were still alive, which of course is reports after the second and third wave.
Sure.
Because it was not just one attack.
It was
about 4.
It was
4
about
waves?
and it lasted for a couple of hours.
It was like I think it was like noon before they quit.
And they
they'd come over, they bomb, they go home, they refuel, they come back again.
And I mean, again, they're starting right after
7:04,
somewhere around
like
there.
that.
So just after 7 o'clock in the morning Pacific time. Well, sorry, Hawaii time.
Yes, Hawaii time, which is
about what 8?
It's like let's see, it would have been winter. I don't know if daylight savings time. That always messed me up anyway. But it's like 7 hours short of DC.
Okay,
So
that's right.
It's early afternoon in DC.
Yeah, and again, DC doesn't get the report until after the main attack has already begun.
Right. They get after the first wave. I think they get the first
Initial
telegram that says, "Wow, things
Whoa,
are bad."
Hello, because of course there's so many people.
And of course, so many people were confused because of the red circle on the fuselage.
Right.
Because at the beginning of the war, American fighters and bombers had a star with a red circle in the middle.
Exactly.
So that way we could have red, white, and blue.
Uh-huh.
We dropped the meatball real fast.
Yeah, real quick. But again, this whole situation of Pearl Harbor really does open a can of worms that the Japanese cannot close.
And just backing up a little bit and going east to the Atlantic, the Navy in the Atlantic has been at war since September.
Right.
By executive order again.
Yes.
He is the commander-in-chief, so he gets to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And the Atlantic Charter,
Mm-hmm.
American destroyers and cruisers start protecting convoys,
Right.
which means they are in direct conflict with U-boats.
That's true.
Starting in September, and the war doesn't start until what, December 11th is when Hitler declares war on us or something like
Right.
that?
Well, I mean, we asked for our declaration of war December 8, 1941.
But it was only against Japan.
That's true.
He did not include the entire Axis because it might
Well,
not have passed.
Exactly. And it did not have a unanimous pass either.
And that one senator from what, Wyoming?
She was the representative from Montana, Jeanette Rankin.
Yeah, but she didn't get
Yeah.
reelected.
Yeah, probably not, because she didn't vote for the World War I declaration of war either.
And then she was still in office. Wow.
Yeah, she
That's
was.
pretty
World War I,
surprising.
she said no. World War II, she
How
said
did she get in
no.
office for World War I?
Because in Montana or Wyoming, women got the right to vote. It was a state right. It was not a national. It was not a national amendment until, of course, 1919. But in the states, you could have your representatives.
Huh?
So, like Wyoming and Montana, they were one of the first to allow women the right to vote in state elections.
Well, that's because, we only count 3 guys.
Right.
It's hard to do elections. 2 people are running, the other guy gets to choose.
Exactly.
Better have the women vote too.
Right.
There's not a lot of people running around the Wyoming territory.
No. And that's
what, 1876 they become a state?
Yep.
A centennial state?
That was Colorado.
Colorado, my bad.
Yeah.
They didn't do women though. Just
No.
the Wyoming and the Montana.
Wyoming, Montana.
Farther
they were-
north.
Yep.
Anyway, that's completely off topic.
Yep. Sorry about that.
But from September on to December,
Mm-hmm.
we're headed to war.
Oh yes.
And hindsight being 2020, I don't know how we would have ever avoided it.
Oh, you couldn't have. You could
the
not have-
Japanese were playing the full game because they had diplomats in
Yes.
DC negotiating to work out a deal so they could get oil again, and they looked like they were coming hand in hand.
Uh-huh. But
Meanwhile, their ships were literally sailing for Hawaii while these guys were negotiating, which is another reason that American anger at the Japanese throughout the war is always higher than the Germans and the Italians.
Exactly.
They want to fight Germany and Italy and knock them out, do what needs to be done, but it's personal.
Yes.
I mean, in that kind of sense with the Japanese, they attacked us out of the blue with no real provocation. And they faked like they weren't going to be attacking. They were playing like they were our friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really played on the American psyche, which just amped up an already brutal campaigns. The campaigns we'll see in the Pacific, other than the Eastern Front with Germany and the Soviet Union, you just don't see the barbarity, I guess, for lack of a better term.
That's a good point to think about.
As we go through the war, it's something to always keep in mind.
Yes.
That as nice as we are, and like we like to see ourselves, the Pacific campaign was, a lot of people say it was racism. I don't think it had much to do. We made horrible, we called Mussolini Benny the Moose.
Right.
We made fun of everybody.
Hitler
and we
making
caricatures. Demeaning them as people, the Hun,
sure,
as the British call them, or the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
Those were all things that we did to all of our opponents. But that level of betrayal that we felt against Japan,
of course,
was so much higher, so much stronger, that it's going to play a part in everything that goes on in that war.
Yep.
All the way to the end.
Exactly.
And it just gets worse, because of course, any time when you're being brutal, it gets reciprocated and upped.
Oh, for sure.
That's the whole concept of an eye for an eye, is to keep it from doing that.
Yes.
It's equal.
Right.
Nobody goes for that.
Not in this time.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's a good place for us to stop.
I think so.
I feel we covered quite a bit of ground, and hopefully you guys have learned a lot about the idea of how the United States gets into the war, and again, the statistics, or not the statistics so much, but the strategies and the logistics of the situation. So do keep in mind, again, tune in, like, and share us.
And
yes.
Share with everybody.
Yes.
All right.